back with another episode of A Pod Has No Name, and we're getting close to finishing our read-along of The Way of Kings. We announced last week that we were going to be continuing with the Stormlight archive, but, with a quick pause in the action for Warbreaker before we dive into Words of Radiance. But we have two more this pod, and then one more pod after this, before we finish up The Way of Kings. With me as always to talk about the chapters that we just read. Tom, how's it going, man?
It's going well. It's going well. Really enjoyed this set of chapters, and I'm excited to dig in with you this week as we near the end of our War of Kings read through.
Yeah, the first chapter this week, 58, was really, really good. I did just want to touch the time. I noticed he did a couple other things this week. Party on Broad, Eagles mock draft, some other content you're putting out there.
Yeah, so if you are an Eagles fan or a draft fan, I think I've been doing a lot of draft content on Party on Broad for the Painted Lines. So we did a mock draft earlier this week. Today we did some of our favorite fits at different offensive positions. That'll be coming out later today, so later April 5th. And those are pretty timeless. And both times I thought they went really, really well, and a lot of good insight from our guests. We had Chris Malley today from 4th and John, and Seamus Clancy from Bleeding Green Nation and Twitter, and his own newsletter and everything. He's a great follow. So yeah, it's been really fun. Kind of digging into some old college football on YouTube with no commercials, getting into the nitty gritty as I hold on to any and all sports that are left in this world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if a lot of our fans would be, necessarily Eagles fans, but I'm the type of guy, I don't really watch college football, but then once April comes around, I cram everything for the draft, whether it's, teams that might be targeting, the type of players that, the Eagles are targeting, just to read up on them. So, if you have any interest in the drafts coming up in April, definitely check out Party on Broad and the other things that, Tom and, just the Painted Lines in general is doing. But, we might as well just kick off, these set of chapters here now because, some really juicy things happen. We can start off with 58, which, it starts off with this, pretty, petty political mingling, I guess you can maybe call it, with Adolin and like a triple date he's on, or like a quadruple date, was it?
Some sort of orgy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like how yellow wine is like the wine that gets you tipsy. I wouldn't, is this like an enhanced form of white wine, do we think?
Yeah, I've seen orange wine. And I know people are into the orange wine, but I don't know if I've seen yellow wine. That seems kind of otherworldly to me.
It's I think it must be Rochard specific.
Like a limoncello. That's not really wine, but I don't know what the flavor notes of a yellow wine. It seems like something that would be pretty fruity and citrusy. So yeah. I'd get down to get a little tips on the yellow.
Yeah. Now at this point, I am a pretty big Adolin fan, but he does seem the most polished of our male point of view characters. Mm-hmm. I think I would like a chapter where he just breaks down the different wines of Rochard and what does which. At this point, my interest is pretty peaked in that. Yeah,
that's your love of Lord of the Rings coming through right there, where you just love huge passages of writing that have nothing to do with the story.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm curious, man. If yellow is going to take the edge off, then what do we drink in the really, what color are we drinking to really party? That's what I'm dying to know. Now, as Adolin, mingles here, just, a little bit of the dynamic. I didn't write down all the names, but the name that seemed most important was Danlin, who's kind of his date at this point.
Yeah.
Now, I guess she's new to the Shattered Plains, but it's been 5 or 6 years now. So, I was thinking, at this point, Adolin is probably, from what we know from the past chapters, the pickings must be pretty slim at this point, right? So I don't know if Danlin is the new hot commodity because, she hasn't been around for the past 6 years. But, it seems like they got off to a good start.
Yeah, she definitely was down to go watch him duel, so,
Yeah, which is always, that's always good. Now, Inkama, who was Yakimov's date, Yakimov, I guess, is one of his male friends, and Inkama was Yakimov's date, just continually dunks on her, just trashes Inkama. I'm curious if Inkama will be in the story again because of how it seems like Adolin just completely dislikes her.
Yeah, I don't know if this was like a seduction technique to like dunk on the one girl so the other girl laughs, and they kind of get on this weird bullying. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Now, Adolin, like, he almost annoys Danlin at one point because he says that she's ignorant despite knowing that she isn't. So I think Adolin needs, I don't think he's as smooth as he really thinks he is. I think he needs to tread a little bit carefully there.
Mm-hmm.
But, his friends start to talk about Dalinar and, questioning whether or not, pretty much all of the problems that Adolin and Dalinar have been discussing in his most recent chapters. But, like, at this point, Adolin has obviously done a 180 on that, doesn't want him to give up power, doesn't want to take over. And, they even talk about Dalinar abdicating. And, Adolin brushes them off by saving Elhokar, by saving Sadeas. He's more than proved that, like, his Blackthorn reputation, right?
Definitely. And
yeah.
I thought this whole kind of conversation, this was the first time that we really got into the personality of Sadeas and kind of understood his dynamic a little bit better with Dalinar here.
Yeah, you mean like you're talking about the conversation when they're watching the duel, right?
Right.
Before the duel. Yeah, so, Adolin, he brushes them off and then he just kind of walks away. And, the POV switches to Dalinar. And this was my favorite part of the chapter where it's Dalinar, Sadeas, and Elhokar there. And you're right, I think it did dive into Sadeas a little bit more, but I'm still curious about whether or not he's honest in front of Dalinar. He was proven right to trust him, but I'm still, I don't know. As a reader, I think it's harder to convince me personally. But there's a quote here where maybe the codes weren't just. This is from. I'm sorry. Before we skip ahead, I did just want to mention Adolin. The quote he had was, "Maybe the codes weren't just about protecting against the Parshendi. Maybe they were about something more." About giving the men commanders they could respect and rely on, about treating war with the gravity it deserved. Maybe it was about turning a war zone into a festival. The common men had to remain vigilant. Therefore, Adolin and Dalinar did the same. So I thought that was a turning point for Adolin's like character. That like his arc is like you know what I mean. This chapter is when like he start to like really get it. And then you switch over to Dalinar now, who's about to watch him duel. And he gives this like fantastic story about we've seen the epigraph. I walked from Abba-Mabar to Urathiru.
Mm-hmm.
Urathiru. I know that we had some help with the pronunciation on that word from the comments, so I promise by words of radiance I'll have it down. But I thought this was a pretty fantastic story, and I just wanted to pause and talk about it for a second because I'd love to hear what like inspired the kind of story as a whole and the setting. It sounds like there might be like some religious inspiration just in terms of, it seems like most people in Rashar are different like subsections of the same religion.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder how the real world influenced that. I'm just curious about like what, real world analogies and inspiration that he had for this story, because it sounds like there might be some. Did you think about that at all while you were reading it, or were you more just like engrossed in the story itself?
So I know that Brandon Sanderson is a Mormon, which is a pretty devout religious branch.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really consider it while I was reading, but just thinking through it now, I'm sure, and I don't know the Book of Mormon, not the play, the actual Book of Mormon. I don't know it well enough to really comment, but there's definitely there's a lot of similarities in religious stories, and allegories across like different holy books. And so I think a lot of those same themes we're seeing here with the Way of Kings, and definitely this long, drawn out, walkabout journey is something that I would imagine comes from that religious influence of his Mormonism.
Yeah, and as we read, I'm curious to see, like, you know, for example, in Lord of the Rings, like with Tolkien's writing, there was obviously like some Christianity inspiration, like especially in terms of the elves, I think. But there's been other writings where like the inspiration, like religion and like how like its real world, like might be inspired, but then the author might flip it on its head at one point, right? I think George R. R. Martin did that in Game of Thrones a little bit, where he had like, you know, these different religions, and every one except of the 7 that most closely resembled Christianity was like legitimate.
Right.
So, you know, you can. I'm interested to see if Sanderson is ever going to like flip this, or if, you know, the heralds will continue to be, you know, the main focus. You know, just curious to see how he goes along with it. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that for a moment. But, you know, I was pretty shocked at how attentive Sadeas is to this story about the king and the Hoden. You know, this was the author of The Way of Kings, his real name, you know, likely lost in time. This story I took as, you know, the origin of Journey Before Destination that we need to hear.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, so this is probably like you know, he mentioned that there's a bunch of different parables, but because of the Journey Before Destination quote, you know, I do think this is, you know, perhaps the most important one. So yeah, you know, definitely interesting there. Now, after the story is told, and, you know, Sadeas again is, you know, surprisingly like attentive and you know, somewhat genuine during that conversation. You know, Elhokar mentions that his father spoke the way Dalinar, you know, does now. And he also mentions that Wit had left, but because he makes him laugh so much, he'll forgive those transgressions. And we'll have a lot more to talk about Wit in just a couple chapters here. Now, Adolin's duel starts, and this was an interesting part here because, you know, we've known that Adolin is a good like dueler, but we haven't known a lot about the context of like how dueling works with the Alethi, like in a larger scale.
Yeah,
and it seems, you know, he could be a champion if he pursued it, but at times of war, I guess it's frowned upon because he is a Bright Lord. So that was interesting. But, you know, I really liked the dueling chapter, especially when it was like, you know, talking about how they only do it when when the piece of shard plate breaks. So, you know, that was interesting. Good little duel there. But like, this is when things really start to. You find out a lot more in this chapter, particularly about Elhokar, right? Sadeas and Elhokar, you know, they grill Dalinar about wanting to leave the Shattered Plains. Dalinar explains, you know, he fears for Elhokar's stability. By going home, they could tighten up the kingdom. You know, send envoys to pursue why the Parshendi killed Gavilar. And he just gives like bullet point reasons on why this is a good idea. And at the end of it, Elhokar, you know, says that he wished Dalinar explained it like that from the beginning. And then we get this quote, and I want to hear your reaction to this. They always watch me, always waiting. I see their faces in mirrors, symbols, twisted and human. Now, did you catch the Shallan parallel there? Like with the drawings, you know what I mean?
Mirrors, symbols, twisted, inhuman. Interesting. So I didn't catch that while I'm reading, but I think that is a good point. And perhaps that's kind of alluding to that Elhokar is suffering from some of the same things that Shallan is suffering from.
Yeah, and it gives
but maybe he's having he's able to see these beings as well.
Yeah, so and it gives some credence to his paranoia, right? Like we kind of thought he was just a a little bit of a weirdo throughout the story, and now because of this comment, you know, he might actually have a reason to be like insane. So, you know, really interesting. And I also wanted to point out, you know, I think when authors use like, they'll use keywords to describe things, and they'll use that word over and over again, like from different POVs to describe the same thing, so the reader knows what it is that they're describing. And inhuman was the word used to describe the face in the sky that Kaladin saw during the high storm. And, you know, Sanderson chose to use inhuman again here. So I wonder if the faces that Shallan and Elhokar are seeing are related to what Kaladin saw in the high storm. Some food for thought there. But then at this point, Dalinar agrees to use some bridgemen on his runs, but under the stipulation that Sadeas arrives first still, that way the bridgemen that Dalinar use can, they can't get fired upon by the archers. And then in a surprising move, Sadeas asked for a copy of the Way of Kings, which, again, I still question whether or not he's genuine, but it seems like he's, turning a corner, you think?
Yeah, I do think it's genuine. I guess I understand you still clearly have reservations, and you think there could be a turn coming here for Sadeas where he betrays them. But getting to know him better, I do feel a sense of it being real this time, and that he actually does care, particularly after Dalinar saved his life.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think that was kind of Sadeas waking up and realizing that the Blackthorn is still there, inside Dalinar. So maybe that's why he's giving him the light of day here. I can't help but worry about a betrayal at some point. But we'll see how it goes. And the end of 64, going forward is probably where we'll see how legitimate Sadeas is. But before we get to that, 59 was a pretty interesting. It reminded me of a superhero origin story with Kaladin.
Okay.
He's training how to use the Stormlight. Tef tells him about the Radiance and their ideals, strength before weakness, journey before destination. Interesting, to pay attention on how his views will change. Right now, Kaladin has such a strong opinion on Light Eyes that, as these ideals become more a part of him, as he learns to use it, it'll be interesting to see if he views Light Eyes as part of the people he should protect. That'll be an interesting journey for him. Brightness Hashal comes and says that Bridge 4 will now be on bridge run duty every day, and they still have chasm duty at night. So this is, things are getting pretty desperate here for Bridge 4. Gaz is nowhere to be found, and he hasn't been around. We remember that we had him for a POV just for a page or two, and he was seeing things out of the corner of his eye. Do you remember that?
No. Can you kind of explain it further?
He was so we found out that he was blind in one eye,
mm-hmm.
and he had he always thought he saw something out of the corner of his eye, and I thought that he was just because he was blind, he never adjusted to seeing, not being able to see out of that eye. But now I'm wondering, was he paranoid like Elhokar and Shallan was? I'm not sure, but either way, he hasn't been around. I gotta wonder if Gaz is dead.
I think he's dead. I think that Brightness Hashal basically was sick of all the bullshit going on with the bridge crews, and may have discovered some of the under the table dealings between
that he was taking,
Gaz and quietly in the night killed our man Gaz.
Yeah, it's been real, Gaz. It's been real Navani, man.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. Now, Kaladin, this is interesting here. So, Kaladin, I mentioned him learning about the Radiance and, all of that jazz, but he thinks back to his father's words here that, someone has to take that first step. And I think this is Kaladin kind of coming around and starting to think that he needs to save all of the bridge crews and not just Bridge 4. I wonder if he's going to, have, a moment of, a key decision where he can either try to save them all and probably fail, or just try to save Bridge 4. And I am curious what he would do when faced with that dilemma. But at this point, he tries holding in the Stormlight, and he lashes himself to the wall without knowing it, right? We know he lashed himself to the wall because of the Seth chapters,
right?
And he immediately falls on his ass. So, it's going to be really cool. And, I think it was chapter 61 when they go on the bridge run. We can talk more about it then. But it's going to be really cool to see Kaladin kind of grow up until Seth's level, in terms of using the Stormlight. And right now that was, it's cool that Sanderson wrote it in the way that we have a POV that can do that, because we know the things that he's doing without Kaladin necessarily knowing that he's doing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that perspective when you're kind of ahead of the, the main character, or the character of the story. The viewer or the reader in this case, has more information than the character itself. It's kind of fun to see them work through things and figure things out.
Yeah, and everybody told us before we started the series that Sanderson has such a unique and well-respected magic system in all of his books, and seeing that play out has definitely been a treat, and I look forward to learning more about that. There's also, in one of the Reddit comments, somebody told us about the ad arcanum at the end of the book. So once we finish, make sure you go through, like, it's basically like the last few pages. It's like a little section that gives like definitions of fabrials and listing some of the magic systems. So, it might be good just to look at the end.
Okay.
I'll find the commenter at the end of the episode. But at this point, this is when we start getting like Kaladin's idea. He starts cutting the armor off of the dead Parshendi and attach it to the vest that the bridgemen wear. He needs to get it to the bridge, so he does this like Mission Impossible type move where he lashes the rocks to the wall and then climbs up the wall, the chasm wall, all the way to the bridge and ties the armor underneath it. And then he has this point where Silk tells him to just jump, and because the rocks are starting to fall, the lashing has worn out, and he does a lashing superhero landing on the floor.
Yeah, I definitely like in my mind saw like in the air, like lands with like bent knees, fist in the ground, like a pool of dust surrounds him, and then like everyone's like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah,
that was the whole moment where I was like, "All right, Kaladin's fucking even more badass than we knew."
Yeah, and of course it's only Lopin that's there with him, and he just hits him with like, "Hey, Gancho!"
Yeah, big Lopin guy.
Yeah, big Lopin fans here. So he tells Lopin to get the armor that's tied underneath the bridge for the next bridge run. And I'm just curious about your ranking so far, because my top 3 Bridge 4 members at this point are Rock, Lopin, Teft. I like Dabbit as well. Dabbit is the one that had like he had PTSD and he hasn't spoken since that one bridge run, but he still helps Lopin out. So I like Dabbit a lot. And, Scar and Moash, are, I think Scar has the cooler name, and they're the top 2 with the spear. So do you have any ranking for Bridge 4 at this point?
So I'm gonna say that I think Teft has moved into my number 1 spot.
Okay.
I'm a big Teft guy. Rock's still holding it down at number 2. But also we're getting close to Lopin replacing Rock. Rock's kind of been quiet these last few chapters. But Lopin seems like a good guy. I just for some reason and you'll appreciate this. I just picture him as like if he were in reality, the kind of one-armed guy with the old school Irish hat who sits in the corner of the Irish pub, and he's there every night, and he's friendly with everyone. He's he's a little bit of an alcoholic, but he's that's my Lopin in reality kind of read. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And if once you get him talking, you find out about his 1,000,005 cousins.
Yeah, I didn't want to. Well, the reason why I specifically said you'll connect to this, I feel like that's a common archetype of Northeast Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, listen, you're absolutely correct in that, and I think if I had if I lost an arm and I had a stronger accent, I think I could maybe be Lopin.
Yeah,
I think I have enough.
You need a few more, years of being beaten down by the system to.
Yeah, you're right.
And get through it with positivity.
Check back in with me. Maybe after this pandemic, I'll be closer.
Yes.
Let's dive into chapter 60 now. This one was okay. This is a Dalinar flashback chapter. So it starts off with Adolin and Dalinar. At this point, both agree that he cannot abdicate. But if he does turn insane, there's a clause where Adolin can, dispose of him or make him step down. So, good clause to have. And at this point, I'm glad that the whole Dalinar stepping down thing is off the table, because I thought that was bogus. I'm glad that Adolin has come around. Now, Adolin and Navani both say don't trust Sadeas. Dalinar seems to think his position now is ideal for him because he's important and in the king's ear, but he's not important enough to take the blame for anything.
Right.
Which, when he puts it like that, that is the pretty ideal position to be in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You get the clout, but you don't have any like the responsibility. So I think that's a good judgment by Dalinar.
No, that's the position you always want to be. It's the backup quarterback of the fantasy world.
Exactly.
All the credit and all the love with none of the work.
Yep.
None of the blame.
Sadeas is trying to get that Nick Foles clout.
That's right.
Now, Navani shows off a new kind of Fabrial here, and this is a little bit crazy to me because, well, let me explain what it is first. You like put it on whatever is injured, and it makes it so that you like it doesn't cure it, but it makes it so that you don't feel the pain.
Yeah.
And I kind of imagine this as like almost like a robotic looking thing. Is Rashar about to have a mix of like fantasy and steampunk? Do we think?
Yeah, the more and more that they dig into the Fabrials, and I hope we see some of this in Warbreaker, and in the other Sanderson books as we move forward here. Just give me more and more of the technology and the engineering. I'm obviously I work in technology. I'm a technology nerd, so anytime we can get into this kind of stuff, and I do like the fantasy steampunk vibe that you're getting at. Yeah. I kind of like, like that tape that athletes wear, like that white tape that's like spread out on your arm.
Yeah, or like on your shoulder.
Yeah. I kind of like pictured that, but like made of metal with like a gem in the middle to power it.
Yeah, that's also kind of the vision that I had when Navani was describing that. So yeah, pretty cool. And she made it seem like a bunch of cooler things are in the works. So I wouldn't be surprised if you like by words of radiance or like an Oathbringer maybe if Navani has like crazy invention that she busts out. So definitely something to keep your eye on. Now, Dalinar's vision begins here, and he finds himself in a palace as an advisor to a king. And the king's talking about, desolations continuing to come and how, they're never ready. And, he's asking Dalinar questions about surge binders and, the Nahel bond and, all these things. And, a couple questions that I wrote down as I was reading were, one, what are surge binders? Because they sound a lot to me like, the name of it is escaping me right now, but what Yasna had when she killed those robbers in the alleyway.
Oh, the soulcaster.
Yeah, so like surge binding and soul casting seem like super like we haven't seen a connection yet, but I wonder if that's just like an old word for it or like maybe an outdated version of soul casting.
Yeah, that's an interesting take.
And then like something about the Nahel bond and how it relates to surge binders. I was also thinking, are surge binders shard bearers? Perhaps they have powers like the Radiance. Questions that we don't have the answers to yet, but just wanted to consider, for going forward.
Yep.
And then Dalinar comes out onto a balcony and he sees the latest desolation, but it's his home city in Kholinar. So this is one of, he's, the past visions, he's been in places that he didn't recognize, but this is one of the first ones where, like, he knows where he is, and although it's a different era, he can still recognize it. And then we see the creatures that we saw in the prelude, and we had some really good description of them that I jotted down. The stone creatures that Kellic was describing to us in the prelude, 5 to 6 times the size of a human, skin dull and gray like granite, long limbs, skeletal bodies, 4 legs, maybe arms set into wide shoulders, and the faces were lean, narrow, and arrow-like, which, just like pointy, I think is how that's, which, it sounds insane. I would love to see, I know Fixer is always giving us, those images, and some other commenters are always giving us like fan art. Let me get a fan art of this thing. I think they're the Voidbringers.
Yeah,
that's what they are.
I think it's Voidbringer season.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so if somebody has any fan art of that, definitely share it with us. And And, you know, just putting the pieces together here, it seems like someone named Elhokar brought Kholinar into war when the Desolation came. And because of that, they were so broken up at the end of that war that when the Desolation came, they couldn't combat it properly. And they said that they lost 9 of 10 people. So like 90% of their kingdom is now just dead.
Right.
So basically decimated. So, you know, another question I had is, who is Elhokar to bring them into war? You know, shouldn't this be this king's decision? I don't think we know enough about how, like, the power and political structure of you know, what's going on here. Maybe Elhokar is a surge binder, and, you know, whatever a surge binder is gives them some sort of authority. You know, maybe we'll get another flashback that shows us a little bit more. But, you know, it turns out that this is the king, Nahodin, that wrote the Way of Kings that Dalinar is reading. Doesn't know his real name, though. I guess that's been, like, lost in time. And Dalinar realizes that he's this advisor to this king, and he asks him for help. Like, what should I do now that 9 of 10 people in my kingdom are gone? Like, how do I rebuild?
Right.
Dalinar tells him, well, he knows that he dictated a book eventually, so he tells him to do that. And the king has like this is not a fan of, you know, the idea.
Right.
Basically says, you know, he needs to do anything but that. So that was pretty surprising, right?
Yeah, it was funny. I feel like it's like a trope that like different movies and books have used in the past, where like someone goes back in time and is expecting like to be a part of this really significant moment, and then they kind of throw you off the scent by saying like, why the fuck would I write a book? Or like in Back to the Future, like, why the fuck would I date that guy? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And
so it was kind of funny. I kind of laughed to myself. And honestly, like, this whole setting, I hope that this might be the case. I don't know about the time period of the 2 side books, but like, I want an entire book during the Desolation and like in this time period.
Yeah, like any Desolation. No, I agree 100%. Even just like the the prelude was like post battle with Kellic. I wonder if, like, it would be awesome if we ever get a flashback of, like, maybe Talonol when, like, he's like, before he dies. Like, just getting a flashback of that, like, actual battle. Could you imagine if Dalinar has a vision where he's actually there?
It would be sick.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So his name is Karm, he realizes, the name that Dalinar is, like, seeing this through. One-armed advisor, the last that the king has that can write. He says that he wishes for peace, not power, that he needs to unite the kings, but implies it in like a way of action and not a book, which is surprising to Dalinar.
Right.
And then when he returns from the vision, Navani writes down, you know, like the gibberish that he's
Oh yeah, this was honestly like, I was so fucking happy when this happened. I was like,
yeah,
perfect.
This is like the Matrix, like red pill or blue pill scene where like this is real. And she realizes that what he's saying is actually like an ancient and dead language that like he couldn't have learned. Calls it the Dawn Chant, and it's from the time of the Heralds, and basically proves that his visions are not like him being insane, that they're actually legitimate, or that he's seeing things that are real, at least for whatever reason. So yeah, big reveal moment there where we finally find out that Dalinar is not. You know, as the reader, we knew it, but like the people in his circle now know that he's not losing his shit. Now, chapter 61 rolls.
Like that, we're basically getting to the point where we're going to be able to translate like this ancient book, and I'm just like, I'm seeing the dominoes fall in my head. Like, we're going to figure out like this is the only way to like translate this to stop the Voidbringers. The Voidbringers are going to be back, like, and it's just going to be just fucking incredible. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and now get this too, right? Maybe I'm starting to think: do you think there's any connection to the book itself and what the king wrote? And do you think there's any like, you know, I was wondering if maybe there's like a supernatural element to the book that when you read the book, or when maybe it affects you in a certain way. But I guess because the way the culture is set up, the woman that you're reading it to, Dalinar, would have to experience it as well. So maybe there's a hole in that theory. There. But I was wondering if maybe like the words in the book itself are related to the Dawn Chant, make people, you know, see these things. But maybe that's a little bit out there. Now, 61 rolls right back into Dalinar and Navani. Dalinar's visions, do they come from good or evil? He's kind of starting to question this. And I love how Sanderson writes Dalinar's character questioning these things, and I think because he does that, we should too. I think I've kind of assumed that the visions were like from, this almighty figure, and that it would be a good thing. But do you think there's a chance that it could be coming from like a more nefarious source? I mean, probably not. Like, I don't think like the sake of the story would make a ton of sense if that was the case.
Yeah.
But I think it's, it's worth considering the motivations, right? Like if the heralds are doing it, we know the heralds walked away from mankind. So like what motivation would they have now to bring it back? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And how does that relate to like the Knight's Radiance and that kind of the ability?
Yeah. Yeah. So, definitely just something to consider. I don't think we obviously don't have these answers yet. But as we go along, I'm curious to see, especially like if Kaladin, Elhokar, Shallan, Dalinar, like are they all being affected by the same source? Or there may be two different forces that are working against each other here with different characters maybe. Now they do bring up the Night Watcher and the old magic again, which we know from that epigraph with, the Mistress when she was destroying all that art of the heralds. Still not 100% sure what that was about, but we know that the Night Watcher and the old magic are related with Dalinar's past, not with the visions necessarily. But he says, they ask him what it is, and he says that shame is his own. And he has a quote here: "Would that day never stop haunting him? Was not losing all memory of his wife enough? What did Rennering think? Would he condemn his father for such an egregious sin?" So we know now that the curse. So he has a boon and a curse from this. And I was thinking maybe he asked to forget about his wife because like the pain was too much. But It seems now that was the curse. The curse is that he can't remember anything about his wife.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Because he says was not losing all memory of his wife enough. You know what I mean? It seems like he asked for something and he lost that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I totally missed that. I thought that was what he was at. Yeah, and that was a really good catch by you the other week. And then this, like, quickly, like, flipped.
Yeah, quickly did a 180 on me, but it's interesting there. And, so we have that half of the puzzle, but we still don't know what boon he asked for. Maybe it's related to him and his brother. Like, I don't know. We'll have to see as we go along here. But it is interesting, and it seems like him going to the old magic is like very like shameful. I'm sorry you had to discover my shame that he did this. So interesting there. But because Dalinar knows what his boon and his curse both were, they agree that it's likely unrelated, but maybe something to monitor. Then Navani gives this like folklorish account of how modern Makabaki was founded. And the beginning of the story has the Desolation referenced. So that, somewhat proves it's not, I don't think it was like an historical account, but maybe gives a start for them to look into something to prove that the visions to other people are real.
Right. Yeah. It's a good jumping off point.
Yeah. Now this is when we get like that Navani Dalinar scene where we realize that Navani is, where I realized at least that Navani is a much deeper character than I had given her credit for. She says that in the 6 years since Gavilar's death, she's been treated more like basically like a child. She's cared for and is pampered and is given all the boons that an ex-queen should have, in terms of like royalty and lifestyle, but isn't involved in anything actually important. She's cut out of certain social circles. It reminds me of mob movies, like when people outlive their time. Like they're shown respect, but like they're not dealing in, the day-to-day.
Interesting.
The day-to-day things, like relics still walking around. And she knows that Dalinar is one of the last left alive that remembers when they were young and important. So, if the world's going to treat her that way, like at the very least, she can't have Dalinar treating her that way as well. And then Dalinar, he caves, man. What did you think about this?
I mean, I felt like it was coming, the codes can only go so far. The heart does what the heart wants.
Yeah, and I've mentioned a few Chekhov's guns in the story, but like Dalinar and his awkwardness around Navani was definitely one of them. And then what about he caved? They're a thing now. They're an item. But what do we think about this line? Something is wrong in this world, Dalinar. The king of Yakoved was assassinated. I heard it just yesterday. He was killed by a Shin shard bearer in white clothing. So I've been waiting for, Dalinar to find out that Zeth killed the king of Yakoved, and not as strong of a reaction as I would have expected so far, but I think that conversation is coming down the road.
Okay.
And then she also says, have you heard the twisted things men say when they die? The surgeons are talking, and the storm wardens whisper that the high storms are growing more powerful. I mean, it's clearly obvious to us because we have a lot more context, but like a desolation is coming.
Yeah.
Sure.
We're on the brink.
Yeah. As you said earlier, it's about to be Voidbringer season. So, hopefully they can wrap up this Parshendi business soon. Now, she also says that Yasna is looking for something. I've been dying for like a Yasna Dalinar conversation. I hope maybe in Words of Radiance we can get like a detailed one. But yeah, now chapter 62. This was a pretty fire chapter. Kaladin is wearing a prayer tied to his arm because on top of re-questioning his faith, it reminds him of his mom. Moash gives him a little bit of shit for that. Moash also has this crazy, so like they're like getting ready for a bridge run, right? For the next bridge run. And Moash has this crazy idea that he wants to jump Sadeas as he crosses the bridge, which is, a ridiculous idea. Thankfully, Kaladin shuts that down, and says that he has a plan. And if it doesn't work, he'll be dead and Teft will lead them out, that very night because they're doing bridge runs every day now. They're really, a bit of a ticking time bomb. And then what do you think about Kaladin just, bodied the soldier that came up for water? Really, really shut him down. That was a great scene.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah, get your own water, dude. Come on.
This is, Bridge Crew 4, and I think this is to like a larger point. Kaladin is raising the bar, and you'll see it like as this chapter concludes, and then even with Sadeas talking in a future chapter, like he's raising the bar for what the amount of respect that bridge crews deserve. He's leading the bridge crew civil rights movement here.
Yes, absolutely. And I just one point to that soldier, like just get a canteen, tie it to your belt. It's really, it's not that deep. But so they're gearing up for the bridge run now. Kaladin puts on the Parshendi armor that he made, takes a small gulp of Stormlight, just enough to really give him a little bit of an edge here, but not too much to make him glow. And the Parshendi are pissed, focus all their fire on Kaladin. And like this, like if this were to be on screen, I would imagine it like slowing down, where like slow motion, where you see the arrows flying by, and Kaladin just goes full Neo and is bobbing and weaving his way through them as he runs. I think this would be an awesome scene, if it's for when it is adapted down the road. Right.
I agree.
Now, yeah, he reflects how like this feels natural. His body was waiting for it. And then he eventually makes it, and the bridges are safely set, and Teft confirms he wasn't glowing. Now, it's funny because when Kaladin is running, he makes it seem like he's dodging like almost one spurt of arrows at a time, but like he was probably getting shot at by like every single archer. Like it definitely looked way more ridiculous than he thought it did in his head.
Yeah, I got major Matrix vibes here.
Yeah, like so hard.
And this was and I also for some reason like it got to the point where I felt like he was like toying with them, like kind of dancing around and pissing them off even more.
Yeah. Yeah,
and this was just really, really cool. I feel bad for Shen though.
With this now, and then like the lashings, it's like a mix of like Inception and Matrix, but in a fantasy setting. It makes for some kick-ass chapters for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sadeas gives a douchebag compliment to Kaladin, and Bright Lord Matal promotes Matal. Matal's the husband and Hachal is the wife, I think. I've been mixing them up, but that's what I'm going to go with for right now.
Yeah.
And that like they expect Kaladin to be doing this every time. So, this is now, Kaladin in a way has, come up with a good plan here. But what do you think about like Shen at this point is not okay, almost crippled, definitely traumatized him seeing him do that with the Parshendi armor on. And I just have a million more questions about the Parshendi, and it seems like every time, we find out one little thing, like why can they feel such emotion in that regard, but like nothing else really moves them? It's like whatever like spell or whatever happened, to those people. I'm so curious about whether it was Voidbringer related or Herald related, or there's something, they were robbed of something, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It might honestly, though, I think it is like it could just be a cultural thing. Like they have such a and this kind of ties back to religion, where like the original religious ceremony is basically like the ceremonial like burying of your people, and like giving respect to people as they move on to like the next life, or like the life after death.
Yeah.
And so it might really just be like, this is like the most deeply rooted religious and spiritual belief of the Parshendi is respect of the dead. And then treating them in like this is just, or anyone else kind of like disrespecting them is the number one on their priority list.
Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe they know more about, like, the story is that the Voidbringers chase them out of like paradise and into Rashar, and that when they die they'll help the heralds like fight in the afterlife. Maybe they know something about that, and like their whole life is revolved around like death and the afterlife, maybe. So food for thought there. Now Kaladin noticed that his hand is shaking. He's in shock, and I wonder, like, I wonder if this will continue to happen as he masters the Stormlight. Like, he's probably never put his body through what the Stormlight does to it. So it's the surge and background of Kaladin makes his POVs interesting for like those type of things. And he realized here that he hasn't been cursed, but that makes him blame himself for the failures he had, which is definitely not the way to go about it. But that's really the type of character he is. Definitely not afraid to put blame on himself or anything.
Right.
And this was a really cool moment where, he's working on a wounded bridgeman when Parshendi archers fight through the Alethi line specifically to shoot at him. They're that pissed. Still that pissed. This is like mid-battle, and, right when they're about to fire, Dalinar comes and wipes them out, and then like raises his blade in salute, which a lot of the men take kindly to, and Kaladin it questions it, but definitely you can tell that moment was, if maybe the most positive moment he's had with the Light Eyes, right?
Yeah. And it's pretty like I said kind of earlier with like, the Kaladin leading the Bridge Crew Civil Rights Movement. He's like, besides the fact that he can like suck into Stormlight and now is like a superhuman, he is earning a reputation.
Yeah. And it's funny that we haven't heard Kaladin mentioned in any Dalinar POV, like particularly when he's speaking with Sadeas. But I would love to have a chapter where it's brought up. But maybe Kaladin and Dalinar meet. Maybe Bridge Crew 4. Well, we'll talk at the end of 64, but maybe Bridge Crew 4 will be one of the ones with Dalinar. Coming up. We'll see. Now, 2 more chapters here. 63 was a little bit shorter than 64, but we learned this is back with Kaladin now, and we learn a little bit about Leighton, another bridge crew member. Used to be a blacksmith apprentice, took the fall for a big piece of equipment, and Kaladin has him working on Parshendi armor for everybody, for the entire bridge crew. Moash and Kaladin have a conversation about Kaladin being one of the runners in front of the bridges. Kaladin tells him that the person that he failed at this point was his brother, and everybody kind of seems to regard his. Do you remember in Saving Private Ryan how they all had a bet on Tom Hanks' past?
Yes.
And at the one point he tells him he was a school teacher, when they were least expecting it.
Right.
So great scene. It reminded me of that. There's a line where it mentioned that Kaladin's past has become a big deal to Bridge 4. So he tells him that the person that he failed was his brother. And the conversation goes on, and Moash says the difference between them is that Kaladin wants to save someone, Moash wants to kill someone.
Mm.
I wonder if Moash has a more significant backstory than we've been led on. He said that he wanted to join as a spearman and instead got shafted as a bridgeman. Maybe there's more to that. Where he must have joined because there's someone in the camp he wants to kill, right? If that's the case, just based off him saying.
I thought it was more so like he wanted to be a spearman and like he wasn't like qualified, or he was like too low of a or something.
Oh,
he was a spearman, that he was like he originally was a spearman, and then he was kind of de-escalated into a bridgeman. That was kind of my read on the situation, but I do like the conspiracy that he's trying to kill some sort of light eyes here, and there could be, and I do agree that I think there is more of a significant backstory with a lot of these guys that we into yet.
Yeah, so we'll see as we continue to read here. We have a part where Rock says he'll talk to Sigil about an escape plan, whether it's false trails, distractions, faking their own deaths. I guess everything is on the table at this point. And then Kaladin refuses to spar with the man, and, basically saying once he picks up the spear, like there's no going back. So I'm taking this as that, like when Kaladin finally does, we're going to get like a Seth-esque chapter where he just goes off. That's what I'm thinking.
And I think we're eventually going to get the Kaladin. We thought it was going to be Dalinar Seth, but maybe it'll be Dalinar plus Kaladin against Seth.
Oh, a 2-on-1. Yeah, and who knows? Maybe there will be another evil henchman that reveals himself. We'll get a 2-on-2 type battle happening.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Like I remember, like as I was reading through Game of Thrones, like Red Viper versus the Mountain, or Mountain versus the Hound. These different like marquee battles is like you don't get them that often, but like once they come around occasionally. So if I'm really excited to see what the marquee battles, duels, I guess maybe even that we see in the Stormlight archive. Now, 64, like people said, 63 and 64 like start the shit, like that starts the. I saw somebody say, was it the Sand Avalanche? It was like a play on words between Avalanche and Brandon Sanderson, which was funny to me. And I think 64 kind of, really gets the ball rolling with that. So Dalinar and Navani continue to see each other with their retainers present, which is bizarre to me. Like having a low key relationship while your court watches seems like a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
But do you, man? Do you? We learn more about Dalinar here. It seems like he always stepped aside so Gavilar could have his glory, and at one point he even contemplated killing Gavilar. He says more so for Navani than the throne, but I think maybe a little bit of both, because he vowed he'd never sit on the throne after that. But here's my question, right? He says he almost attacked her because attacked Gavilar because he wanted Navani. So then why did he vow to never sit on the throne, right? I think there's a little bit of both at play. And maybe we'll learn more about it. I don't know. Just something, that's just my read on the situation, just based off of that one, couple of lines of dialogue there.
I think that's part of like him, like putting his character in the past, and like there's going to be like some flashbacks of the real Blackthorn, like when he was kind of like more of a scoundrel.
Yeah.
When before he found the Way of Kings and the codes in all this, and kind of took the vow to be more of a second banana. It was kind of like his own personal, like Chris Bosh going to the Miami Heat. Like he's like he could have scored 1,000 points, and been the leader of the kingdom and kind of led into his old bad habits, but never won a championship. But he was really committed to the Alethi cause and wanted to join kind of the big three.
Yeah. I think I get more of a Wade vibe.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think,
Wade still powerful.
But I don't think Dalinar's going to be third fiddle to anybody. You know what I mean? It's second fiddle maybe, but not third.
Right. That's a good.
We might have to do an entire pod on Stormlight archive character to NBA player analogies. So keep an eye out for that in the future.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll have a mailbag episode. And
Yeah.
And if you guys want to hear that in the future, you'll just have to submit it as a mailbag question.
Yeah, or any other analogies. I think it's a great game to play. Now, I also wanted to mention too, Sanderson does a great job of having, like, despite characters being POV characters, they keep secrets from themselves and therefore keep secrets from the readers. Like, Shallan low-key has a shard blade and, like, mentions 10 heartbeats a couple times, but never mentions anything else about it. So, like, we don't really even know what's, Shallan has, like, all these mysteries about her that she just doesn't ever think about. So, like, because we're her POV, we don't find out about it then. And, Dalinar, I think, is low-key the same way. Like, we've been talking about his boon and his curse, but he's never in his head come out and said what his boon was, right? So Sanderson does a great job of masking characters' past and intentions, even while they're POVs. And, this is the first chapter that we find out, more about his curse. Navani mentions his wife's name, and all he hears is, like, whenever her name is mentioned, all he hears is, like, a whisper in the wind. Like, he can't ever hear her name again, and he can't remember anything about her. And I thought this was a pretty heartbreaking, like, paragraph here where, like, he, like, slyly tries to coerce Navani into telling him about his wife because he can't remember. So I thought that was a pretty powerful couple pages. She says that she wasn't, like, a bright mind, but I thought by, like, Alethi standards, that might mean that she just wasn't conspiratorial, like she wasn't plotting against everybody. So maybe, like, Navani took that as wasn't bright. But says that she was very kind and hard to hate and fit Dalinar well. So I thought that was a powerful couple pages where we learn more about his curse. And I thought it was just, deep to see him, like, try to, like, get information about his wife because he can't remember. Yeah. Now, Dalinar, like, seems to realize this is a bad idea, him and Navani, but nothing outright forbids it, and he does want it, so he decides to go along with it. They talk about whether Elhokar will care or even notice, or if it'll enhance his paranoia. I think I wouldn't be surprised with any of those results, but I am worried that he's going to find out and lose his mind, like, go off the deep end completely at some point. But before they can talk about that more, there's the horn sounds for a chasm romp. This is the tower, right? This is where Kaladin tried to zigzag with the bridge and got, like, all the other bridge crews killed.
Okay.
So they never actually won at this plateau yet, and it's the biggest plateau, I think, that is within reasonable distance. So Dalinar runs off and tells Navani, or Navani tells him that he was right to trust Sadeas, but to keep him at arm's length because we need him for our cause. The words "we" and "our" are being used there. Surprised Dalinar, but he does realize that they're in cahoots together now.
Definitely.
So as this rolls down, we had a quick Kaladin POV in this chapter where all of Bridge Crew 4 has the Parshendi vest and armor. They've had a few practice runs with this new method Kaladin has. And what about this? What did you think about this, man? As they march out with the bridges, all the other bridge crews cheer them. We're cheering them.
That's what I'm saying, man. He's leading the movement. But
yeah.
And they mention it here because, like, before he did this, and he's done this for 5 or 6 bridge runs now, this dancing act where he, like, takes all the shit and takes all the arrows. So, like, these people are just living. So they're like, yeah, whatever. Like, this guy might be a little out there, but, like, we're about the cause.
Yeah. Also, it reminded me again of the Gladiator when, like, he finally turns all the gladiators to his side, and I don't know, it's just such an interesting comparison, I think, to Russell Crowe there. So yeah, it's cool feel good moment. Then we switch back to Dalinar and Adolin, and so this is an interesting part, right? Follow the numbers here. Sadeas says that his scribes predict the Parshendi have no more than 20,000 to 30,000 troops left. On this large tower plateau, they will bring 10,000 of their, 20 to 30,000 that they have left. So a third at the least, maybe even half. Dalinar is going to bring 8,000. Sadeas is going to bring 7,000. That's, what's that, 15,000? They should outnumber them by a significant amount, and they hope that they could trap them on the plateau in a way that they are surrounded so that they can't leap away and just kill them all. And that with such a heavy blow, it'll make the war impossible to fight because they just simply don't have enough soldiers to commit. So, first, only question I have, great plan, but are Sadeas' estimates right? I'm not, so confident, but we'll see. And Dalinar agrees to use some bridge crews, but, Sadeas promises that he'll create a foothold so that they can cross cleanly. And then, the last line of the chapter is Dalinar, let's end this war. So people were definitely right that the avalanche starts now, and it was hard to put down at that point. But I am glad we did it this way, because now we're going to just finish the book and do a megapod for the next episode. So, the next time we'll be putting the book down is, when we'll finish it. So, before we dive into epigraphs and Reddit comments, your reaction to those chapters as a whole and just like looking ahead now?
I mean, For Whom the Bell Tolls is playing in my head right now.
Yeah.
I'm ready to roll. I'm probably going to pick up and rip through the end of this book this afternoon after we finish here.
Yeah.
You guys might think that Shane and I cheat and read ahead, but we honestly do wait until we do the podcast to read the next section, and this has been the hardest one to stop at so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to that point too, like I'm on Reddit a little bit, but other than that, like I have avoided the internet with Stormlight archive related things like the plague. Thankfully, I haven't had anything spoiled to me yet, but I did miss a couple things. There was we had a comment on the Reddit page. Do you remember in part 2 there was a series of epigraphs that was like, "Welcome, we're writing to you, old friend." It was like a letter, like the epigraphs formed like a letter.
Yeah.
So we had a comment saying that this is never like outwardly said in the series, apparently, but that letter was Wit writing to a character that we just don't know. But interesting that he was in the epigraphs throughout part 2, and we just hadn't realized it. So that's cool. We definitely are prone, especially like, Easter eggs like that with things that aren't actually necessarily related to the story. If we miss something like completely, feel free to, remind us to circle back. I went back and read that chapter where we learned the name Thydakar from both Amaram and then in the prologue from King Gavilar when he was dying, his last words to Seth. The other name I think it was Restaurant. It was Thydakar and Restaurant. So those are two names to keep in mind going forward, as either, maybe they are something to do with, Gavilar and the Parshendi and the Desolation. Yeah, so let me do the epigraphs for this chapter, because these continue to be like last word epigraphs, and I'm sticking to my theory that these epigraphs and the people's dying last words are Dalinar in Damnation. I think he's forced to feel every single person's death. So like 57, all the world was shattered, Maps yelled, back arching eyes wide. Flecks of red spittle on his cheek. The rocks trembled with their step and the stones reached towards the heavens. We die. Rest in peace, Maps, bridge crew member. Definitely not cool. Not cool that we lost Maps.
Not cool.
Reese Shepherd, the Midnight Brother, giving him to abominations with her essence so dark, so terrible, so consuming. She is here. She watches me die. I don't know who the Midnight Mother is, but she sounds horrible. Sounds like, I don't know if she's related to if she comes with the Desolations or not, but that doesn't sound good.
No,
above the final void I hang, friends behind, friends before, the feast I must shrink clings to their faces, and the words I must speak spark in my mind. The old oaths will be spoken anew. So like above the void I hang, again, I think Dalinar. 60 was, the death is my life, the strength becomes my weakness, the journey has ended. So that's a play on the Radiance ideals. The death is my life, the strength becomes my weakness, the journey has ended. That sounds like Dalinar is like he's breaking, not doing good in Damnation. In the storm I awaken, falling, spinning, grieving. The darkness becomes a palace, let it rule, let it rule. I wish to sleep. I know now why you do what you do and hate you for it. I will not speak of the truths I see. And then the last one was, they come from the pit, 2 dead men, a heart in their hands, and I know that I have seen true glory. So, yeah, he doesn't seem to be doing well, if that is telling all.
A lot of suffering going on here.
A lot of suffering. Yeah, a ton of suffering.
Bad week.
Which makes me wonder, if I am right and all 10 heralds were to go into damnation together, like, does that mean, like, does having 10 of them make it so that, like, they split it up the suffering 10 ways so that, like, maybe it's more bearable, and maybe because he has the, you know, the weight of all 10 of them, that, like, I'm just curious to see if when the Desolation comes and the heralds come back, what will, like, the dynamic between Dalinar and the 9 heralds that abandoned him, like, whatever, you know, that's going to throw a wrench in the whole, like, how everything works. I don't know. So that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really my main takeaway from those epigraphs. The heralds and Dalinar. Nothing really else jumped out at me.
Same here.
Cool. All right, I'll just run through some of these Reddit comments first. You know, Deluge, you commented a couple times. The Wonder Sail story was really cool. And, you know, the artwork somebody shared was actually, like, it was pretty beautiful. Now, yeah, Kaladin and Seth analogies, we talked about Deluge. That was definitely something I've been considering. Also, everybody that commented, like, a recommended reading for Warbreaker, when we finish next week's finale pod and I have the Warbreaker in my hands, we can decide which. Tom has his copy. I haven't gotten mine yet. So once we both have ours and we make sure that, you know, our editions, you know, line up or whatever, we can figure that out. Yeah, Zillion 2010 said, I don't think you guys remembered, but back in Interlude 1 in the Pure Lake Interlude, one of you guessed that the person the group was looking for was Wit, and you've been shown correct from last week's chapters. So I meant to go back and mention that because I did guess that it was Wit, and I didn't take my victory lap.
I know, you should have. Was that one of your guesses for points?
It was one of my guesses for points. I'll go back, and when we start Warbreaker, I'll have, like, a scoreboard.
Okay.
Like a finished scoreboard that I'll have listed, as well as unanswered questions.
And we can post that in the Reddit group as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Going down here. Also, to everybody that commented, we're going to be posting this on Podchasers, Overcast, Pocket Cast. Unfortunately, we messed, something was wrong with our RSS feed that they come up as a pod had no name. So for now, if you can't find it under a pod has no name, try had, HAD as in David. And we'll try to, you know, we'll get that fixed as soon as possible. Simple mistake there.
Yeah, and tell us in the Reddit comments, since the pod had no name, but I guess now it does have a name, what the name of the podcast should be. Yeah.
There's some linguistic gymnastics to jump over, to jump through with that, but you're gonna have to give me a couple weeks to think of an answer for that one. The pod is whatever you want to name it, really. Now, Zapsia, you mentioned Zapsia commented. So, if Dalinar's boon was to forget about his wife, what was his curse, or do you think it's possible that the curse was forgetting his wife? Yes, I do see now that Zapsia, I think I got a little bit ahead of myself there. But yeah, you and Lessard are the ones that commented the recommended reading. So Lessard and Zapsia, thank you for that. We'll definitely get back to you guys on which one we'll be going with. Watermelon Panda gave us recommended listening for chapters 67 and 68. I'll take you up on that. Watermelon Panda.
That's a good one. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'll let you know that. Or a Spotify thing? I guess I'm gonna have to find that.
Maybe YouTube. Yeah, YouTube is always a safe bet if you can't find it on a streaming service of your choice. Yeah. Lessard, I think, liked our kills per page analogy. We'll keep you updated on that one.
The other thing I wanted to mention, especially since, like, I mean, you guys are so great, like, commenting every week, like, providing us all this insight. Like, well, one, I don't know, like, it seems like you guys took a college class, like, on this book series. I mean, the ability to call back on, like, specific things from, like, they must have read this book, like, many, many times. But
yeah, I mean,
The other thing I wanted to
series like this, and I'm sure you're familiar with it from Harry Potter, like the fandom, like once you get into the fandom is like legit, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of like that with Harry Potter, where I can make those callbacks.
Yeah, and once we'll be that way. We'll be that way with the Stormlight archive eventually.
Hopefully so. And the other thing I wanted to say, I think just before we log off here, I don't know, do you have any other Reddit comments you want to get on?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say is something I think that would really help out Shane and I as we're looking to get into more people's ears, especially as we're kind of starting a new book in the next probably, I don't know, like week or so. It would be really, really helpful if you guys pointed us in the direction of other subreddits that you guys are a part of that you think similarly would enjoy the podcast and kind of help us. Obviously, you don't have to do this. This is just like a very nice thing you could do, kind of help point us in the direction so we can continue to build an audience and get more people excited about the podcast and continue to kind of build our nameless army here. So any help there would be really, really appreciated. And as always, we love you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to rate on iTunes or, whatever app that you listen to, especially now that I'll post, the links to the other apps that the podcast is on now. Any type of like rating or review you can leave, definitely appreciate that. So yeah, definitely recommend, what Tom had just said there. Fixer, again, thanks for the artwork and the epigraphs. The Parshendi artwork is really interesting, and it's really interesting that Sanderson hasn't confirmed if anybody is close to getting their appearance right. I imagine everyone that you sent I could see being the right one, but the one that you did, your personal favorite of the female Parshendi, I think I like that the best. It looks just very unique and very like fantasy world. So I think that's my favorite one as well.
Okay.
Yeah. He mentioned the ad Arcanum too, so we'll definitely read that at the end. And then just the last one was Zillion Adolnasium Wit asked Dalinar if he knows what that is, and he was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Turns out that this is something to do with the Cosmere as a whole, but trying to explain it would spoil a few things. So definitely something, just a word to remember, I guess. And Soulless Kara, I'm glad that you're glad that we're continuing with the Cosmere. Definitely excited to keep going through with it. So that wraps up this week's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Next week, like I said, we're going to be finishing the book. We're going to be finishing The Way of Kings. I'm going to be ordering Warbreaker today. So hopefully, once we finish The Way of Kings, we'll do like a mega pod on the last like dozen or so chapters. I think it's like 130 to 140 pages, so it's really not like the most heavy reading. So we'll do a longer pod though, maybe to fit everything in. So, look forward to that next week. And then next week we'll announce the Warbreaker reading schedule as well. We'll probably do that in 4 parts, so a quicker series. And then we jump into Words of Radiance, where maybe we'll take a little bit slower, Journey Before Destination. So that's the plan as of now. I'll be posting the link to, Overcast, Pocket Chasers, or Pocket Cast, Podchasers, iTunes, and if you prefer YouTube, we've been getting the YouTube up to date with our past episodes, so you can check us out there too. A lot of different ways you can listen now, and expanding ever more.
No video yet on YouTube, but if enough people want to watch us talk about it, we can pivot to video. I do video for the some of the other pods.
Yeah, I mean, I look a little disgruntled right now, so I would need a heads up.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little hungover today. I look pretty tired.
Yellow wine last night?
No. Just 11 Miller Lights.
Just 11 Miller Lights. Okay. Fair enough. Well, that's going to be it for A Pod Has No Name this week. We'll talk to you guys next week when we finish The Way of Kings.
Goodbye now. Bye.